The grand chamber of the High Council of Xylos was not designed for silence. It was an architectural marvel of singing crystal and pressurized resonance, constructed to amplify the voices of the galaxy's masters, to turn a whisper into a decree and a decree into law. The domed ceiling, a transparent membrane separating the atmosphere from the cold, uncaring void, usually swirled with the violet mists of the Xylos nebula, casting a regal, bruising light upon the delegates below. But today the light felt oppressive, a heavy shroud draping over the shoulders of the 300 sovereign representatives. The silence that hung in the air was not the absence of sound. It was a physical weight, a suffocating pressure that pressed against the sensory organs of every species present. It was the silence of a stopped heart. In the center of the obsidian floor, a single figure stood. He was small compared to the towering, chitinous bulk of the Kravnok War Master, and fragile compared to the crystalline permanence of the Ethel Guardian High Chancellor. He was soft-fleshed, bipedal, and unadorned by bioluminescent displays of dominance or cybernetic augmentations of intellect. He was Ambassador Julian Thorne of the United Terran Coalition, and he had just uttered a sentence that had severed the tendons of galactic order. He had not shouted. He had not slammed his fist upon the podium. He had simply adjusted the cuffs of his synthesized fabric tunic, looked up at the High Chancellor with binocular eyes that held the terrifying calmness of a deep ocean trench, and said, "Humanity resigns." The echo of those two words seemed to rattle within the minds of the Council long after the sound waves had dissipated. High Chancellor Voktil, a being of living jagged quartz and shifting internal light, shifted on his levitation dais. The grating sound of his mineral body adjusting was the only noise in the vast hall. His internal light pulsed with a rapid, jagged rhythm, betraying a confusion that his ancient, stony face could not express. He looked down at the human, expecting the punchline of a primitive joke or perhaps the trembling retraction of a momentary madness. But Thorne did not tremble. The human stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed, almost bored, as if he were waiting for a transport shuttle rather than dismantling a 4,000-year-old political hegemony. Voktil's voice, when it finally emerged, was the sound of grinding tectonic plates, amplified by the chamber's acoustics until it vibrated in the chests of every delegate. "Ambassador Thorne," the Chancellor began, the condescension dripping from his tone like acid, "the translator matrix must be malfunctioning. The concept of resignation applies to a minor bureaucrat leaving a sanitation committee. It does not apply to a founding member of the Galactic Council. It does not apply to the species responsible for the logistics spine. You cannot resign from civilization." Thorne's expression did not change. He tapped a command into the small, flat slate on the podium before him. A holographic projection materialized in the center of the room, a complex, rotating map of the galaxy. "Civilization," Thorne repeated, his voice soft but carrying a timbre of absolute finality. "An interesting word, Chancellor. We have different definitions for it, I believe. For 3 centuries, humanity has served as the engine of this council. We built the warp gates that connect your trade routes. We maintain the hypercoms arrays that allow you to govern from this crystal tower. We terraformed the agricultural worlds that feed your grand armies. We did this because we believed in the promise of unity." The hologram shifted, highlighting the intricate web of blue lines connecting the star systems, the human-built infrastructure. Then, with a simple gesture from Thorne, the blue lines turned red. "But we have observed. We have learned. The Council does not desire unity. It desires stagnation. You desire a permanent hierarchy where you sit at the top, and we remain the useful engineers in the basement. We are not leaving civilization, Chancellor. We are leaving you." A murmur rippled through the gathered delegates. The Kravnok War Master, Krell, slammed a multi-jointed limb onto his console, shattering the screen. His mandibles clicked in a furious rhythm, a language of war that required no translator. "Insolence!" Krell roared, his voice a series of wet, guttural barks. "You speak of stagnation while you stand under the protection of our fleets. You speak of leaving. The Terran Coalition is bound by the Treaty of Antares. You are bound by economic debt. You are bound by the simple fact that without the Council, Earth is a lonely rock in a hostile dark. If you walk out of this chamber, you walk into oblivion. The Council's protection ends at the threshold. The trade embargoes will be instant. Your economy will collapse within a solar week. You are threatening us with your own suicide, human." The War Master leaned forward, his compound eyes glittering with predatory malice. "Or perhaps this is a negotiation tactic. A crude attempt to leverage better trade tariffs. Speak plain, soft skin. What is the price of your loyalty?" The insult hung in the air, heavy and rancid. The other delegates leaned in, expecting the human to crack. They expected the veneer of stoicism to crumble under the threat of economic ruin and military abandonment. Humans were known for their adaptability, yes, but also for their emotional volatility. They were short-lived, frantic creatures, obsessed with accumulation and status. Surely this was a bluff. Surely Thorne would name a price. A new colony sector, a seat on the High Tribunal, a reduction in tithes. But Thorne did not haggle. He looked at Krell with a mixture of pity and detachment, the way a parent might look at a tantrum-throwing child who does not understand the danger of the fire they are playing with. "There is no price, War Master," Thorne said. "The debt you speak of is a fiction. The Council owes Earth 300 years of back pay for labor you deemed essential, but refused to value. As for protection," a ghost of a smile touched Thorne's lips, a cold, sharp expression that sent a shiver of inexplicable unease through the assembly. "We have never needed your protection. You have always needed ours. You just never noticed who was keeping the monsters at bay while you argued over border taxes." Thorne stepped away from the podium. He did not ask for permission to withdraw. He did not bow to the Chancellor. He simply turned his back on the most powerful beings in the galaxy and began to walk toward the massive iridium doors. "The withdrawal is effective immediately," Thorne called out, his voice not amplified, yet cutting through the stunning silence. "All Terran personnel have already been recalled. All Terran assets have been secured. The warp gates are locked to our frequency, but we will leave them operational for one standard cycle to allow you to adjust. After that, they go dark. Goodbye, counselors. I hope your stillness brings you comfort." The doors hissed open, and the bright white light of the docking bay spilled in, silhouetting the human for a brief moment before he vanished, the doors sealing shut behind him with a resonant thud that felt like the closing of a coffin. For a long moment, no one moved. The absurdity of the situation paralyzed them. It was as if the floor had announced it was leaving the building. Then the laughter began. It started with the fluid, gurgling chuckle of the hydrodelegates and spread to the chittering of the insectoids and the harmonic humming of the crystalline beings. High Chancellor Voktiel allowed his internal light to brighten in amusement. "Let them go," he declared, his voice booming with restored confidence. "Let them sulk in the dark. They will return within the month begging for scraps. They believe they are the architects of the galaxy. They are merely the janitors, and janitors are easily replaced." The Council erupted in agreement. Decrees were passed, sanctions were prepared, and the grand machinery of the Xylos bureaucracy ground forward, confident in its eternal permanence. They did not know that the sensor readings on the outer rim had just gone silent. They did not know that the subspace frequencies were already thinning. They did not know that the human ambassador had not walked away into the dark, but had stepped onto a ship that was already charging an engine drive the likes of which the Council's physicists claimed was impossible. The collapse did not happen with an explosion. It happened with a whisper, a slow, creeping rot that started at the edges and worked its way inward. It began 72 hours after the humans departed. The first sign was the breakdown of the luxury trade route from the Vega sector. The warp gates, those massive rings of spinning exotic matter that punched holes through the fabric of spacetime, began to drift. Without the constant nanosecond micro-adjustments beamed from the Terran navigational hubs, the gates lost their harmonic synchronization. Ships dropped out of warp light years from their destinations, stranded in the deep void. Then came the communications failures. The hypercom's network, a lattice of relays that spanned the galaxy, began to experience echoes. Messages arrived garbled, or arrived before they were sent, or didn't arrive at all. The automated translation matrices, maintained by human linguistic algorithms, started to degrade. Diplomatic summits turned into brawls as nuanced honorifics were mistranslated as grave insults. Scholar Alara, a Xantai observer stationed on the central hub world of Xylos Prime, watched the disintegration with a growing sense of horror. The Xantai were a species of watchers, scholars, and historians who prided themselves on seeing the patterns others missed. Alara sat in her high tower, surrounded by data streams that were turning from green to red. She watched the panic in the streets below. The food synthesizers were failing. The atmospheric scrubbers were clogging. The waste reclamation systems were backing up. It was not that the aliens didn't have engineers. They had millions of them. But their engineers were specialists, trained to maintain specific, segmented systems. They understood the how of a single component, but they had lost the understanding of the why of the whole. For centuries, they had offloaded the systemic integration, the chaotic, messy business of making different technologies work together, to the humans. Humans, with their intuitive grasp of chaos, their ability to patch a fusion drive with a wrench and a prayer, had been the glue. Now, the glue was gone, and the beautiful mosaic of the Galactic Council was falling into a pile of broken shards. Alara accessed the restricted archives, looking for the data on the human withdrawal. She found the logs of the Terran departure fleet. It was not a scattered exodus. It was a precise military maneuver. Billions of humans from thousands of worlds had moved in perfect synchronization. They hadn't just left. They had vanished into the unknown regions of the Perseus Arm, a sector of space designated as dead space due to high radiation and navigational hazards. Why go there? Why flee into a graveyard? Alara's four eyes narrowed as she cross-referenced the energy signatures of their departure. The readings were off the scale. The humans weren't using standard warp drives. They were using something else, a gravity-folding technology that twisted space rather than punching through it. A shiver rippled through her slender, gray form. The Council had underestimated the humans to a fatal degree. They weren't just the janitors. They were the secret masters of a physics the Council deemed theoretical. Alara realized with a jolt of terror that the humans hadn't been serving the Council because they needed the money. They had been serving the Council to keep it distracted, to keep it quiet, while they worked on something else. 6 months passed. The disorder, as it came to be known, had turned the civilized galaxy into a patchwork of warring fiefdoms. The economy had imploded. Starvation was rampant on the ecumenopoles that relied on imported grain. High Chancellor Voktil sat on his throne, his light dim and flickering. His authority extended no further than the walls of the council chamber. The Kravnok War Master, Krell, had taken matters into his own claws. He had assembled the Grand Armada, the last functioning fleet of the council, a collection of dreadnoughts and carriers that were running on reserve power and determination. They had tracked the iron trail of the human exodus. They blamed the humans for the chaos. They believed the humans had sabotaged the galaxy on their way out. Krell demanded vengeance. He demanded the return of the servants to their posts, at the barrel of a plasma cannon if necessary. Voktil, desperate for any solution that would restore order, authorized the crusade. Alara managed to secure a position on the flagship, the Star of Xylos, as a historical chronicler. She needed to see the end. She needed to understand. The journey to the Perseus Arm was a nightmare of navigational hazards. Without the human beacons, the fleet had to make short, blind jumps. They lost 10% of the armada to gravitational shear and navigational errors before they even reached the edge of the dead space. When they finally broke through the radiation veil, the crew of the Star of Xylos prepared for battle. They charged their weapon banks. They raised their shields. They expected to find a ragtag fleet of human refugees huddling on a barren rock. What they found silenced the War Master. It silenced the Chancellor. It silenced the galaxy. Hanging in the void, illuminated by the light of a binary star system, was a megastructure of impossible scale. It was a ring, but a ring the size of a planetary orbit. It was not fully complete, but the skeleton of it shone with the metallic gleam of processed asteroids and dismantled moons. Swarming around it were millions of ships, not just human ships, but drones, constructor platforms, and haulers. And beyond the ring, in the center of the binary stars, was a tear in reality. A fissure in the dark velvet of space, glowing with a color that the visual receptors of the council species struggled to process. A violent, sickening violet gold. The humans weren't hiding. They were building a dam. "Hail them," Krell ordered, his voice lacking its usual thunder. He stared at the viewscreen, his tactical mind unable to comprehend the scale of the engineering before him. Tell them we are prepared to accept their surrender." It was a bluff, and a weak one. The human fleet guarding the structure, sleek, predatory vessels that looked nothing like the bulky freighters the Council was used to seeing, turned in unison to face the Armada. They did not power up weapons. They simply scanned. The communications officer, a trembling cephalopod, patched the signal through. The face of Julian Thorne appeared on the main screen of the bridge. He looked older, more tired, but his eyes were burning with a fierce, manic energy. He wore a heavy engineering suit now, stained with grease and coolant. "Go home, Krell," Thorne said, his voice cutting through the static. "You shouldn't be here. This is a construction zone, not a battlefield, and it is certainly not a place for children." "You have destroyed the galactic economy," Voktil shouted from the comms link, his projection flickering on the bridge. "You have abandoned your duties. You are building this monstrosity while the Council starves. We demand you return immediately and restore the logistics spine." Thorne laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "The logistics spine? You think we care about your trade routes right now? Look at the screen, Chancellor. Really look at it." Thorne gestured to the tier in space behind the megastructure. "Do you know what that is? We found it 50 years ago, deep-range telemetry. We kept it from you because we knew you'd panic. We knew you'd form committees and debate and vote while the universe bled out. It's a void breach, entropy from a dead universe leaking into ours. It's a cancer in spacetime. If we don't seal it, it expands. If it expands, physics breaks down. Not just trade routes, Voktil, physics. Atoms stop holding together. Stars simply cease to fuse. The bridge was silent. The War Master lowered his claws. You are containing it. We are trying to, Thorn said, wiping sweat from his brow. Why do you think we worked for you? Why do you think we hoarded credits and resources? We needed the raw materials. We needed the logistics network to move the mass of entire solar systems to this point. We played the servant so we could steal the scraps from your table to build the wall that keeps you alive. But the breach opened wider than our models predicted. We ran out of time. We couldn't maintain your lifestyle and save your lives simultaneously. So we made a choice. We chose to let your economy collapse so that your atoms wouldn't. The revelation hit the crew of the Star of Xylos like a physical blow. The arrogance, the assumptions of superiority, the belief that humans were merely lesser beings fit only for labor. It all shattered against the reality of the immense, glowing ring. The humans hadn't left because they were petulant. They had left because they were the only adults in the room, realizing the house was on fire and dropping their toys to grab the fire extinguisher. The breach is destabilizing, Thorn said, looking at a readout off-screen. We're initiating the resonance pulse in 10 minutes. It will seal the tier, but the feedback loop. It's going to be massive. Your fleet is too close. If you stay there, you'll be vaporized by the Hawking radiation flare. Turn around, now. Krell looked at the tactical display. The energy readings coming from the tier were climbing exponentially. It was a power signature greater than a supernova. If we retreat, Krell said, his voice quiet, what happens to you? You are at ground zero. Thorn looked at the camera, and for the first time there was a softness in his eyes, a profound, tragic acceptance. Someone has to hold the switch, War Master. The automated systems aren't fast enough to adjust to the variance. We have to manually modulate the field integrity. You will die, Alara whispered, stepping forward toward the comm screen. All of you, the entire human fleet. Thorn nodded. Not all. We sent the colony ships away weeks ago. A seed of humanity will survive in the Andromeda galaxy, but the engineers, the fleet, yes, we are the ablative shielding. He paused, looking at the alien faces that had sneered at him, dismissed him, and used his people for generations. The council was flawed, Thorn said. It was arrogant and stagnant, but it was also beautiful in its own way. It was a dream of many voices. We didn't want to see the dream end in silence, so you're welcome. No, Krell growled. The War Master's carapace shifted. A new resolve hardened in his posture. He turned to his tactical officers. We are the high guard of the council. We do not flee while others fight our battles. He looked back at Thorn. Ambassador, you said you need to modulate the field integrity. You need power. You need mass to anchor the resonance. Thorn blinked. Yes, but we are at capacity. You are not, Krell said. You lack the mass of a Kravnok dreadnought. He tapped his console. All ships link navigation to the Terran grid, divert all auxiliary power to their shield emitters, form a defensive sphere around their engineering hub. Krell, what are you doing? Voktil screeched over the comms. You will destroy the Armada. I am saving the galaxy, Chancellor, Krell roared back. For once in our miserable history, we will act like a council. We will not let the humans die alone in the dark. The order went out. It was madness. It was suicide. But as the order filtered down through the ranks, something shifted in the alien crews. The shame of their collapse, the realization of their dependency, transformed into a desperate need for redemption. They saw the humans, the janitors, standing on the precipice of annihilation to save a galaxy that despised them, and they found their own courage. The Ethel Guardian crystal ships moved in, using their hulls as refractive lenses to focus the human energy beams. The Kravnok heavy cruisers formed a physical wall against the radiation storms. The Xantai science vessels dedicated their massive processing cores to the humans' calculations, increasing the efficiency of the seal. Link established, Thorn said, his voice shaking. We see you, Krell, energy output increasing, efficiency at 120%. We might actually survive this. Proceed, human, Krell grunted, the radiation alarms on his bridge screaming. Let us fix the sky. The climax was not a battle of lasers and missiles, but a battle of will against the fundamental forces of the universe. The great ring fired. A beam of pure, ordered reality pierced the chaotic violet heart of the void breach. Space screamed. The visual sensors of the fleet went white. The hull of the Star of Xylos groaned, metal buckling under the gravitational tides. Alara watched the readings. The shield integrity of the human command ship was failing. They were taking the brunt of the feedback. Without hesitation, she routed the shield power from her own section of the ship to the humans, plunging her deck into darkness. Around her, others did the same. Across the fleet, aliens were sacrificing their safety to keep the human engineers alive for just one more second. It was a forge. In the fires of that cosmic crisis, the old council burned away. The arrogance, the separation, the hierarchy, it melted under the radiation of the void. What remained was a fused, alloyed resolve. Then silence. The white light faded. The violet tear was gone. In its place was a smooth, scarred patch of space, healing slowly. The great ring was slag, glowing dull red, but intact. The human fleet drifted, battered, hulls scorched black, but alive. The Council Armada was in ruins, many ships venting atmosphere, but they floated alongside the humans, not as masters, but as brothers in arms. Thorn's face reappeared on the screen. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, and the bridge behind him was a wreck of sparks and smoke. But he was smiling, a true, exhausted human smile. "Field stable," he rasped. "Breach sealed." Krell slumped in his command chair, his mandibles trembling. "Status of the fleet?" he asked. "Heavy casualties," the tactical officer reported, voice quiet. "But we are here, we are operational." The aftermath was not a return to the status quo. It was impossible. The disorder had broken the galaxy, but the event at the Void Breach had provided the blueprint to rebuild it. The humans did not rejoin the Council. The Council was dissolved. In its place, the United Systems Alliance was formed. There were no founding members, no hierarchies based on ancient history. There was only the contribution one could make. High Chancellor Voktiel was impeached for cowardice and incompetence. The Ethel Guardians, humbled by the event, dedicated themselves to restoring the Warp Gate network, this time working alongside human crews, learning the how and not just the what. War Master Krell retired from the military and became the first alien representative to the Terran High Command, fostering a new doctrine of mutual defense. Scholar Alara remained on the Star of Xylos, chronicling the new age. She wrote of the Great Breaking, the time when Earth walked away to save the world. She wrote of the fear, the chaos, and the eventual understanding. But her most famous work, the one that would be taught in schools across 1,000 worlds for millennia to come, was a simple philosophical treatise on the nature of humanity. It concluded with a passage that captured the essence of the species that had changed everything. "We looked at them and saw servants. We saw short lives and frantic energy. We saw chaos. We did not understand that their chaos is a form of preparation. They are a species born of a hostile world, accustomed to the idea that the universe is trying to kill them. While we built towers to celebrate our permanence, they built bunkers to survive the storm we refuse to see. They do not seek to rule, they seek to persist. And in their stubborn, illogical, beautiful refusal to die, they dragged us all into the future. The cosmos collapsed into disorder, yes, but it was the disorder of a birth. Earth broke the Council, and in doing so, they fixed the stars." Decades later, Julian Thorne, now an old man living in a quiet sector of a rehabilitated agri-world, would often look up at the night sky. The scar of the Void Breach was still visible to the naked eye, a faint, dark nebula in the Perseus arm. He no longer carried the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. He tended his garden, growing tomatoes that tasted of real earth and sunshine. Occasionally, a delegation would arrive, young Ethel Guardians, curious Kravnok hatchlings, human students, asking to hear the story. They wanted to know about the politics, the strategy, the great maneuver. Thorne would smile, offer them tea, and tell them the truth. "There was no grand strategy," he would say. "We just saw a leak in the roof, and we knew that if we didn't fix it, the whole house would rot. You don't need to be a hero to fix a roof. You just need a ladder and the will to climb it." But the galaxy knew better. They knew that the ladder had been built of blood and sacrifice, and the climb had been through the fires of hell. And every time a warp gate hummed to life, pulsing with the stable blue light of the new network, it was a silent salute to the day Earth walked away, and the day the universe held its breath, and the day the silence was finally, mercifully, broken by the sound of a hammer striking an anvil in the dark. The universe was vast, cold, and indifferent, but it was no longer lonely. The humans had proven that even in the face of entropy, even in the face of the inevitable end, there was value in the struggle. There was dignity in the defiance, and there was hope in the disorder. One evening, as the twin suns of his retirement world set, casting long shadows across the fields, Thorne received a final message. It was not a diplomatic communique or a distress signal. It was a data packet from the deep-range sensors monitoring the sealed breach. The scar was healing faster than predicted. The universe was knitting itself back together, but embedded in the noise of the cosmic background radiation was a pattern. A response from the other side of the tier, from the dead universe that had tried to consume them. It wasn't an attack. It was a frequency modulation that translated to a single concept, recognized by the universal linguistics matrix. Respect. Thorne chuckled, closing his eyes as the wind rustled the leaves around him. Humanity, he whispered to the stars. We make friends in the strangest places. The galaxy spun on. The Council was a memory. The Alliance was the future. And Earth, the small, wet rock that had broken the sky to save it, continued to spin, a blue pearl in the endless black, the heart of a chaotic, disorderly, wonderful new cosmos. The story of the broken Council was over. The story of the united galaxy had just begun. And this time, no one was just a janitor. Everyone was an architect. The end.